Hello and welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Kimberley Hoeppner, and today is September 23rd, 2019. In just a moment, we're going to be on to talk about your aviation, marine, and public forecasts. Remember, when we're not here, you can always get the information by using our 800 line, 1-800-472-0391, or going onto the internet by typing in weather.gov/Alaska. And feel free to always email us with any additional comments or suggestions you might have. Now let's go on and look at the weather systems across the area. We're going to take a look first across the Gulf of Alaska, which this is where the most of active weather has been. We've seen some isolated thunderstorms around the core of this low as it tracks over to the eastern areas of the Gulf. So expect across the eastern Gulf waters for a few isolated thunderstorms to continue tonight. I'm going to step out of your way here so you can take one more look at that. Crossing the Gulf, it's got a nice plume of moisture on the backside of this system. This is a mature low that's going to be in a weakening phase. As you can see, that tight core center is already starting to look like it's falling apart. Otherwise, fairly quiet across the interior areas of the state with some clearing across the central locations. And across the western areas of the state, we are looking at a low pressure system that's dropping a front across the eastern waters this afternoon. Here's a hint of the upper level low that's traversing over towards St. Paul and the eastern areas of the Bering. And then we just to note, we do have a pretty good plume of moisture, more of a counterclockwise or clockwise rotation over to the west, which we're seeing a ridge that's moving over towards the central areas of the Aleutians. So at the surface, here's the 1024 millibar ridge parked out across the Aleutian chain, and then along the eastern waters we do have a front which was actually pulled down from a surface low that's off of or just north of the Bering Strait, and here's this next system brings some shower activity behind the low pressure. Now across the interior here we had those breaks, but we did have a front that moved through earlier, and so this is leaving some boundary for some showers to develop along mainly Bristol Bay down towards the eastern areas of the Alaska Peninsula. Now the low that's out across the Gulf currently is a 985 millibar low. So this system has got some gusty south to westerly winds along the east and southern sides of this low, and currently moving a swath of rain into the southeast panhandle locations. Now as we head through the overnight hours, this low pressure system is going to weaken, and we're expecting ongoing light rain though to occur across most of the panhandle locations, and we'll see ongoing rain also along the western Alaska range down through the Aleutian ranges for the southwest, and Kodiak probably see a few isolated showers tonight as well. Otherwise, staying mainly dry across most of the state during the overnight hours, other than this front across the west coast pushing some rain from the Seward Peninsula to the northwest coast there. Now behind the system, dry other than just to the north here, as we saw that upper level disturbance moving through the flow. That'll produce some showers across the northern Bering waters. Meanwhile, this ridge will be continuing on a eastward path with another front, a warm front moving into the western Aleutian chain for your Tuesday. So expect very gusty gale winds out into Shemya as we head into the latter part of the day on Tuesday. For most of the interior tomorrow, we're going to see dry conditions continuing. Temperatures will start off cold once again. We'll get to those temperature maps in just a moment. Across the west coast, though, with the cooling temperatures from this overall cold core system, we will see some light snow developing as the next low pressure system redevelops and starts to progress inland. Now, we're expecting 1 to 2 inches for areas just along the west coast, like the Nulato Hills, and mainly elevations above 1,500 feet. So we're not expecting anything at the surface, and the west coast is actually going to continue to still see rain. Now, for the Gulf and the southeast, rain is going to be a little bit lighter, but it still is going to persist as we have a weak troughing that stays over the Gulf waters. So even some shower activity is expected to develop with boundaries across the area for areas like the Kenai and possibly even Kodiak, but nothing is expected to be heavy in nature for your day on Tuesday. And across the northwest coast, like I said, just some light snow shower activity up there as well. So a little bit cooler conditions in the morning and evening across the northwest coast. The changes for Wednesday is that we're going to see that low pressure finally pushing inland and continuing on an eastward track. Now, this system looks like it's going to bring a lot of snow, but this is really for the higher elevations. So a new dusting of snow across area mountains across the southern half of the state. That's what can be expected, with some rain showers across the southwest and all along the Gulf coastal locations, and of course continuing for the southeast locations. As we head into the end of the week, you'll want to watch for the north and west coastal areas, as we're expecting some high waters with this next system that's going to be moving through. It is a very well organized system, a 970 millibar low as it moves into the western Bering waters. There will be some strong gale strength winds out of the south ahead of this system, with more of a southwesterly flow as that system moves further. It's not going to make too much progression on Wednesday, but on Thursday we'll start seeing this system pick up an easterly pace. Meanwhile, we'll have this ridge out along the Alaska Peninsula, with eastern Bering expecting mainly dry conditions. However, those low clouds and fog conditions associated with this ridge is going to probably be troublesome for low-level flying. Now let's go take a look at your temperature maps for Tuesday morning. Let's focus on the interior areas of the state. That's where we saw temperatures down to 22 degrees this morning. We're expecting those temperatures to be very similar as we head into Tuesday morning. So the coldest areas of the state across the central interior, with temperatures at or just below freezing across the north coast. For the west coastal locations, look for freezing trends becoming a little bit more into the 30s, mid-30s as you head towards the southwest there. And the Alaska Peninsula through the Aleutians is going to be dropping into the lower 40s. For your southeast locations and all along the Gulf, expect temperatures to be in the low to mid 40s, a little bit cooler on the western side of the Gulf. Now, the areas just across the interior will slowly cool into the lower 30s, with the west coast seeing really temperatures cooler with that next system into the lower 30s there. As we head into Tuesday afternoon, modified temperatures mainly in the 50s across the southern areas of the state, warmest across the southeast. And for the northern areas of the state, temperatures will still climb above freezing into the upper 30s to lower 40s, with mid 40s expected across the west coast. Now, for the locations across the Bering, temperatures will climb into the low 50s. For your Wednesday morning temperatures will drop a few degrees out across the Bering locations into the mid to upper 40s, with temperatures across the southern tier of the state dropping into the upper 30s to lower 40s. And the coldest areas, once again, are expected across the interior, back down into the 20s to 30 degrees below the freezing mark, of course, across the Brooks Range and north, and a little bit cooler, as you can see, into the mid-30s for the Seward Peninsula and those locations across the west coast. Temperatures across the southeast are going to be cooler into the mid-40s. And then for Wednesday, temperatures will be slightly cooler across the state as we head through the day. So they'll possibly be a degree or two cooler than your Tuesday, but primarily in the lower 40s to near 50 degrees, really near 50 for the Alaska Peninsula and the southeast locations, and out there across the Bering. Now in just a moment, we're going to talk about your aviation weather.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Okay, starting with your aviation weather across the state for Tuesday morning, looking for concerns especially across the western areas of the Alaska range, where they're going to see widespread IFR conditions, with MVFR conditions stretching along the range down through the eastern areas of the Alaska Peninsula. Also MVFR across much of the southern Gulf and into the eastern areas of the state, with some IFR conditions as well. MVFR along the extreme eastern Alaska range, and also along much of the north and northwest coast. Looking out towards the west, looking at widespread MVFR conditions for the Bering, with IFR conditions across the central and northern waters. For your afternoon hours, expect a change with the front coming into the western areas of the state, and then on an eastward track, expect conditions to diminish through the day. Looking for that MVFR to hang on across the west coast, with IFR moving into the southwest coast. And also IFR conditions for much of the panhandle, the northern panhandle, and also some parts of the southern interior. Looking out towards the west, IFR conditions will also be moving into much of the western Aleutians there, with MVFR conditions across the central Aleutians. Across the Alaska Peninsula, look for conditions MVFR spreading further west during the afternoon hours. And then to start off your Wednesday morning, we'll see a little bit more coverage of IFR conditions, so not a great flying weather for tomorrow unless you're in the central areas of the state, with some breaks of VFR conditions in the central locations down towards the Kenai. However, look for MVFR conditions moving into the southwestern Kenai locations. For the southeast, also MVFR to IFR conditions for your Wednesday morning, with IFR and MVFR conditions along the north and widespread IFR conditions across the western Bering locations, and MVFR as well. Now, looking into your afternoon hours, that IFR condition is going to spread a little bit further to the east, with IFR still across parts of the western interior and also along the western Alaska range and down along the northern panhandle. So look for MVFR conditions across much of the state, with some breaks into the VFR conditions after this system exits to the east. Now let's take a look at your passes in more depth. For Anaktuvik for tomorrow, you should go MVFR to VFR during the afternoon, as well as Atigun. Atigun should start off as VFR and stay VFR all day, but they could see a brief MVFR period in the early morning hours. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will also be in the conditions where they're IFR moving to MVFR during the afternoon. Rainy Pass will follow that trend to IFR to MVFR. Looking at Windy, VFR to MVFR. Tuesday for Isabel will be VFR to MVFR. And we'll see Mentasta go MVFR all day, and Tanita will be VFR diminishing to IFR late day. For Portage, look for VFR going to IFR, and Chilkoot and White Pass both MVFR to IFR. We're seeing freezing levels across the state. Here's the white line is the freezing level for the surface, and then we have a increase from 2,000 to 4,000 feet across much of the state, and then slowly increasing 6,000 to 10,000 just south of the Gulf there. And then for the western areas, a climb from 2,000 to 6,000 feet as you head towards the west. For your icing tomorrow, with a next system moving into the western areas, look for icing mainly above 4,000 to 5,000 feet across the western and central areas of the state associated with this next front, and then above 6,000 feet out there towards the western Bering and Aleutians, and above 6,000 feet for much of the areas with an exiting low, another exiting low across the Gulf and the southeast. Take a look at your jet stream component for tomorrow, a little bit more amplified pattern as we head into Tuesday, with a very strong jet moving across the southern Gulf there at 150 knots, and just to its west we have another low in the system just to the west of the Bering. So a little bit more amplified pattern reflects at 9,000 feet. We've got the ridge just south of the central Aleutians with the jet maxes, mainly along the western Aleutians, 30 to 60 knots. And then we have weaker flow out of the southwest between 5 to 10 knots. And then 3,000 feet, very light winds across much of the interior, strongest along the coasts, with the western area seeing 40 to 80 knots. Also, here's your turbulence summary for tomorrow, between or below 5,000 feet for those areas of concern across the state.
Why is plastic marine debris so common? We know there's trash in the ocean. Unfortunately, a lot of it is plastic. We find plastic everywhere, from the ocean floor to surface. The plastics are all shapes and sizes and all different types. We find plastics on beaches, and also inside animals' stomachs or wrapped around their bodies. That's bad news for our ocean and the animals that live in it and near it. It's also bad news for us. A recent study from the University of Georgia estimated that 8 million metric tons of plastic trash enters the ocean every year. That's like putting 5 bags filled with plastic on every foot of coastline in the world. That's a lot of plastic in the ocean, and it's there because, well, we put it there. The 5 most common items found during the International Coastal Cleanup are plastic cigarette butts, food wrappers, plastic beverage bottles, plastic bottle caps, and plastic straws and drink stirrers. Notice anything in common with those? It's a lot of single-use, disposable plastic. It goes without saying, we produce too much waste. That waste ends up in the ocean when we litter or don't recycle. Plastic is an important part of our modern lives. We use it for a lot of good things. But we need to take responsibility for how much we use every day and where it goes when we're done with it. The 3 R's can help, and it's up to every single one of us to practice them. Reduce your use of disposable plastic. That's anything you use once and throw away. Just use less. Reuse disposable plastics when possible. A plastic bottle makes a great coin piggy bank or watering can. The possibilities are endless. Recycle anything that can be recycled so it stays out of landfills, where trash can blow away. Ocean plastic is a huge problem that's only going to get worse. Unless we change our ways, we can do better for the ocean and for us. Why is plastic marine debris so common? We know there's trash in the ocean. Unfortunately, a lot of it is plastic. We find plastic everywhere, from the ocean floor to surface. The plastics are all shapes and sizes and all different types. We find plastics on beaches, and also inside animals' stomachs or wrapped around their bodies. That's bad news for our ocean and the animals that live in it and near it. It's also bad news for us. A recent study from the University of Georgia estimated that 8 million metric tons of plastic trash enters the ocean every year. That's like putting 5 bags filled with plastic on every foot of coastline in the world. That's a lot of plastic in the ocean, and it's there because, well, we put it there. The 5 most common items found during the International Coastal Cleanup are plastic cigarette butts, food wrappers, plastic beverage bottles, plastic bottle caps, and plastic straws and drink stirrers. Notice anything in common with those? It's a lot of single-use, disposable plastic. It goes without saying, we produce too much waste. That waste ends up in the ocean when we litter or don't recycle. Plastic is an important part of our modern lives. We use it for a lot of good things. But we need to take responsibility for how much we use every day and where it goes when we're done with it. The 3 R's can help, and it's up to every single one of us to practice them. Reduce your use of disposable plastic. That's anything you use once and throw away. Just use less. Reuse disposable plastics when possible. A plastic bottle makes a great coin piggy bank or watering can. The possibilities are endless. Recycle anything that can be recycled so it stays out of landfills, where trash can blow away. Ocean plastic is a huge problem that's only going to get worse. Unless we change our ways, we can do better for the ocean and for us.
What is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? Well, first, let's talk about what it's not. It's not a floating island of trash like a garbage dump or a landfill. It's also not the only patch. They exist all throughout the ocean, and the Pacific Garbage Patch just happens to be the most famous. Garbage patches are large areas of marine debris concentration that are formed by rotating ocean currents called gyres, kind of like big whirlpools that suck things in. A garbage patch is made up of tiny plastic pieces called microplastics that are less than 5 millimeters long. It's more like pepper flakes swirling in a soup than something you can skim off the surface. You might come across some larger items like plastic bottles, but it's possible to sail through a garbage patch and not see anything. And they're a big problem for the ocean and us. People often ask why we can't just scoop up all the marine debris in the ocean. And the answer is, unfortunately, it's just not that simple. The first challenge is the sheer size of these garbage patches. They're huge. They're constantly moving with ocean currents. And there's debris from the ocean surface all the way down to the sea floor. Not to mention all the marine life we would disrupt if we tried to just scoop up debris. So what can we do? Well, the ultimate solution is prevention. And we need to keep that as our highest priority. We can reduce, reuse, and recycle to keep trash out of the ocean in the first place. And we can participate in things like shoreline cleanups. It's a lot easier to deal with debris before it gets to the ocean. Because until we stop marine debris at the source, we'll just be cleaning it up forever.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Now on to your marine forecast. Taking a look at the ice edge, that is still quite a few miles north of Dead Horse. The coastal areas along the north coast are still ice-free. Now let's take a look at the southeast forecast for Tuesday, looking at a southerly flow across the inner channels with seas between 3 to 9 feet, the higher seas down further towards the Dixon entrance. And then we're seeing the outer waters, small craft advisories out there with westerly flow. Seas along the outer waters are going to be 18 to 21 feet with swells. Now let's take a look at your Wednesday forecast. Continuing with a southerly flow up the channels for Wednesday with seas between 3 to 4 feet. And then we'll see small craft again on your Wednesday out of the west, 25 knots with seas between 11 to 12 feet. Heading up towards Yakutat there also, they're going to be a little bit stronger winds out of the west at 25 knots. So smaller craft advisories for all of the eastern Gulf coastal locations. For your Tuesday across the north and western Gulf, looking at strongest winds south of the Kenai Peninsula, stronger offshore flow there will give the gale force winds all along the tip of the Kenai, with more of an offshore push west to northwesterly flow across the area. Elsewhere between 10 to 20 knots with 25 knots also along the western Gulf waters. Seas across the inlet and Prince William Sound will be between 2 to 5 feet, with higher seas between 10 to 11 feet across most of the Gulf and along the tip of the Kenai. For your Wednesday, expect winds to be picking up across the western areas of the Gulf and northern waters as well, all out of the west with a little bit more of a southerly direction across the northern inlet. The northern inlet, Prince William Sound, will be at 15 knots, possible higher gusts out there towards Whittier. And then we'll see seas across the Sound and along the northern inlet between 2 to 3 feet, and then seas across the southern inlet at 6 feet and between 10 to 11 feet again for the western Gulf waters and south of the Kenai. We'll take a look at the Alaska Peninsula area. Winds around this location in Kodiak will be upwards towards the small craft advisory criteria at 25 to 30 knots. A little bit lighter wind speeds there south of the Alaska Peninsula. Seas across the Bering side will be 6 feet, and the Pacific side will be between 7 to 11 feet. On your Wednesday, expect a little bit of a directional change, more of a southwesterly flow near the peninsula. A small craft again for most of the area for Wednesday, with seas a little bit higher, 9 to 10 feet across the Bering, and then between 6 to 10 feet across the Pacific side. Now, taking a look at your Aleutian chain, we do have that strong front coming out to the western Aleutians, gale force, max strength at 45 knots. Out of the south with more of a westerly flow through the central and eastern Aleutians, and then we'll have that small craft advisory for the central Aleutians, lighter wind speeds across the eastern waters there, 15 to 20 knots, and then we'll see an increase of winds across the eastern and central Aleutians for your Wednesday, with that strong front pushing through. So look for gale strength winds out there, with seas varying between 10 to 20 feet for the most part, a little bit lower seas out towards or south of Unalaska. Now, for your west coast on Tuesday, we're looking at a southwesterly flow across the area, small craft advisories out there, and we'll see seas between 5 to 11 feet, with a little bit lower seas up there towards the north, east of Savunga. And we'll see around 3-foot seas for you. And then for Norton Sound the next day, we'll see winds changing that direction out of the northwest and then becoming more of a south to westerly component across the central Bering waters and west coast. Small crafts again, and also for Norton Sound there, and we'll see seas on this day between 4 to 10 feet. Let's take a look at your north and west coast. We'll see speeds between 5 to 15 knots, a little bit of a directional wind change from east to southwest. And for your Wednesday, looking at 5 to 15 knots once again, with seas between 3 to 6 feet for both of these days. And then let's recap your forecast. Showers are going to prevail for the southeast, with rain across the western areas of the state, with snow chances increasing as we head into Wednesday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.